So we looked at a joint by joint approach for the squat. Moving on, we want to get to a point where we can see if an individual just in space can get and they have the motor control to squat properly. Now, what a lot of people don't realize, right? So I've got a little height on Jeffrey, but believe it or not, his femurs are longer than mine, so we will squat differently. The way that we are built will dictate how we squat. So Jeffrey and I will probably squat differently as far as our foot position and where our torso is compared from one person to the other. So to start, Jeffrey, just go ahead and drop into a squat like it's hot. Cool, hold it. So we're looking here, right? So when we're squatting, we want to make sure that the torso and the shins have the same angle. As you can see, he has to lean forward a little bit too much here. He's got the ankle dorsiflexion, but we'll probably run into somewhere where there's an issue with where his foot and his foot stands and where the angle is for him to get into a good neutral squat. So Jeffrey, go ahead and come on up. Go ahead, lay down on your back. Perfect. Go feet that way. Head over here. There we go. And we're not moving the camera. All right, so to start, we are going to very passively move his hip into a position where we can get good depth. Since he's on the ground, he is forced to be in a neutral spine. So what we will do is we'll come up with his leg. We'll have him relax. Come under here into the calf so you have complete control of his leg. And what we'll do, we're going to make sure that this leg stays flat. And we're going to bring his knee up until we feel resistance, or we see this leg start to rise up. So here. Okay. So right about just past parallel, we see that other leg start to move. And if you notice, he can get to parallel as far as flexion at the hip. From here, we want to see if we can get a little deeper. Now the hip sockets actually can open up, they can face down, so we have to help him find out which way his foot should face. So we're in this position. We want to make sure we hold the knee and the foot tight, and we're going to rotate out slightly. What I'm looking for is to see when this opposite hip comes up off the ground. So I'm here, I rotate out with it, and I'll see that leg start turning right about here. So in this position, we're able to get that depth a little deeper than we were when we were able to just go straight up into flexion. So his toes at about this angle. Jeffrey, gently hold this knee. Got it? Got it. Now, a lot of individuals, just based off of wear and tear, based off of habits, how we move day to day, playing old sports, both sides of the body won't necessarily move the same, so we have to do the same thing with the other side. So keep yourself relaxed. I got your leg. We'll do the same thing. We got to be key. We're going to probably look on the underside of his thigh to see where the hip moves. So we'll come up into flexion straight up. Right about there, we start to see some movement. So we make sure that he's directly in a straight line with the rest of his body, and then we start to walk the entire leg out to the side. And he's got very retroverted hips, so it's very wide, but let's go to about there. Jeffrey, hold that foot, or hold that leg. Good, keep your toes flexed. And you want to keep a mental note, and you can measure this too if you have a plumb line, and see how far his toes point out. So if you remember when he started, his toes were faced forward. In a natural squat in this position, when his back's flat and we have him in deep flexion, they're pointed out a little bit more than he did when he was standing up. Okay? So let's take a mental note of where you're at. Go ahead and pop up. Off the ground. Go ahead. All right, now Jeffrey, settle the back up a little bit so that we can get in the camera. Okay, right there. All right, now remember your toes. Good. Feet were he's at a little wider stance than he was initially, and his toes are definitely went from forward to out more. Turn that left one out just a hair more, Jeffrey. There you go. Now, brace yourself in the upper body. Let's see your squat again. Go slowly. All right. Now, two things. One, he's still rounding at the low back, but he is much more in line with the shin and the upper body when he's going into the squat. And he's also able to keep a little bit more tension through the back. So if we're loading someone, either if it's a goblet, if it's a front squat, if it's a back squat, we want to make sure this is neutral. So as you can see, he's actually able, even here, to keep this flatter. Jeff, go ahead and posture up for me if you can. There you go. So right here, how do the quads feel?
We're good.
Feeling good, all right. So I'm going to have this for another second. So now you can see this we can load. Okay, he's in a neutral spine. His toes have been moved out. Jeffrey, again, probably has hips that point out to the sides a little bit more, so he needs to let his knees travel out more and put the toes out at angles so that he can allow himself to sink into a position where his femurs can locate into the hips and get this depth while keeping a neutral spine. Go ahead, relax. So kind of an active assessment to get somebody engaged in their squat depth. If somebody's having trouble squatting, you can look at their squat kind of on their own, just like we did in the beginning, and then you can put them on the ground and play with where their legs at, where their feet are at. So you want to look at where the flexion of the hip is, you want to look at where the leg comes out, and also the toe. Because these three things, right, the amount of flexion, where our toes are at, this will dictate how we squat. If you notice, I'm more upright when I squat, and my stance is narrower, but my toes are probably out more than Jeffrey's. Okay, so you have to look at where somebody can squat easiest before you start loading them. And this is a great way to kind of break apart someone's squat and then kind of help them get into their best squat so you can train it. Okay.